we are here in Concord, New Hampshire at the Department of Education with Frank Edelblut, Commissioner of Education, and I want to say thank you for taking a while. I don't get to say that too often, but a while with Granite Rock.
I'm happy to be here, happy to share with you what's going on here at the department.
Well, good. One of the things that I know that most of the Granite Rock readership doesn't understand, because they think, oh, we have a school board. We have total local control. So if somebody ticks me off, I can go to the board meetings, I can do this, I can do that, they can do this, they can do that. And then they find out later on they can't do anything at all. So if you could give a quick summary from your standpoint as the Commissioner of Education here in New Hampshire, what does the Board of Education do at the state level, and what is your role commensurate with them?
Yeah. So, great question, and actually a question that I think you're right, that a lot of times people are confused about the processes and who has what kinds of responsibilities. So we are very much a local control state in terms of education, which means that the local school board has a great deal of authority over the activities and the operations of the school. That local school board is ultimately subject to oversight by the State Board of Education. There's RSA 186.5, I believe it is, which designates that the State Board of Education is like the school board over the school boards, and has some responsibilities. So again, local school boards have the ability to make a lot of local decisions, but when constituents are not satisfied with those, there is an appellate process. And so individuals who they feel like they don't get satisfaction at the local level have the ability through a process to appeal information up to the State Board of Education and have their cases heard there through various mediation processes or through a hearing officer or directly with the State Board of Education. And and then the role of the department really is the administrator of those processes. So the State Board of Education is the adjudicator and the decision maker in those processes, and we have the role of administrating those processes. Does that make it a little bit more clear?
I think so. When there is a problem, however, would they first bring that appeal to you, or do they go directly to the Board of Education? Do you play any role in those kinds of issues at all?
Yep. So generally, first they would, if someone came to us, they had a problem in their school and they came directly to the Department of Education and say, I'm having a problem with my local school board, we would direct them to first make their case to the local school board, because that's the process, right? It's spelled out in rule that they first make the case to the local school board. There are a few exceptions that allow them to bypass that process, but not many. And I couldn't enumerate them for you right now, but they exist. So they first make the case to the local school board. If they're unsatisfied with whatever remediation the local school board takes, they can then appeal that decision, and they would contact the department, and the department would facilitate the process for the State Board of Education. So we administrate the process. Generally, that means that they would have a hearing before a hearing officer. The hearing officer would produce a report. That report would go to the State Board of Education. The State Board of Education would kind of hear the fact finding that the mediator or the hearing officer went through, and then they would make an adjudicative decision about that matter, one way or the other.
Okay, does this happen often?
Yes, I mean, we are in a constant process of hearing cases that come to us and bringing those before the State Board of Education. And when you say often, an easy way to understand exactly how many cases, if you were to look at the agenda for the State Board, whenever there is a case that's brought to the State Board, it's on the formal agenda, and so it's transparent. Sometimes those are heard in non-public sessions, and sometimes they're publicly heard.
Okay. Order of magnitude, is it 1, 10, 100, 1,000 cases a year?
No, we're probably averaging about, I would guess there's probably about 20 cases a year that get to us.
Okay.
So that means that there may be a whole bunch of local cases that come up that are resolved that we don't even know about because they get taken care of on the local level.
Okay. The Board of Education is making the rules, or at least setting the policy.
Correct. And no, they make the rules. They approve of the rules.
Do you folks here under your office also flesh out those rules?
So again, we are the administrators of that process. So we basically administrate the rulemaking process for the State Board of Education, but ultimately it's the State Board of Education that approves the rules.
Okay.
So we don't make rules, we live by the rules, is what I say.
Oh, so in other words, the Board of Education is actually acting like our legislature should be doing and creating not just the policies, but should also be doing the rules.
I think
Sometimes they offload that responsibility to the executive branch. So
Correct.
sounds like you folks are doing it the right way.
Well, so what you'll find is that there are some agencies that have what's referred to as rule-making authority,
Correct.
right? And I think this is what you're referring to.
Correct.
Right. So I do not have the Department of Education does not have rule-making authority. All of our rulemaking goes through the State Board of Education. I just live by those rules.
Okay. That makes my heart feel a little bit happier because, as you know from reading Granite Rock from time to time, I'm a big proponent of having those that make the policy also make all of the rules down to the very lowest level, because that's what they're paid to do. That's what they're elected to do.
Or appointed to do.
Or
In this
appointed.
case, yes, our State Board of Education members do not get paid.
Yes. Yeah. I don't get paid as a budget committee member in my local community either, so I know how this works.
Yes.
So we covered that curriculum.
Yes.
There is the straight basic curriculum that everybody thinks that's happening in the school systems, moderated by the local school systems. But I would be remiss, because we are Granite Rock, New Hampshire's leading political blog site, that we also know that there's a lot of politics that are going on in the classroom, oftentimes unknown until somebody makes a recording of it and then it goes viral. I'm a proponent of not having politics at all, whether it be right, of my persuasion, or on the left. Do you have any kind of cases that come up dealing with those kinds of issues? Because from my standpoint, I'm seeing it happen more and more and more. And I'll tell you why. I have on record, and that I have put up on Granite Rock, teachers telling parents, we have taught your kids to know more than you. There is a condescending attitude by teachers in a variety of areas that believe that the kids belong to them and not to the parents. And therefore they are entitled to impart their morality of whatever stripe and in whatever area as opposing to the parents. So I'm curious to see, and I'm sorry if I put you on a hot spot here, but this is a big deal on Granite Rock. So if you could...
Well, let me back up and I'm going to explain kind of the big
Sure.
picture, and then I think we can drill down a bit. So, again, the State Board of Education creates what's referred to as minimum standards for education. So
Okay.
they are adopting standards and they're defining what they want students to know, and those are referred to as minimum standards of education. The State Board and the department are not involved in curricular decisions, right? They're saying what we want the kids to know and understand, and then that is given to the local school board to determine how they're going to do it. And curriculum is very much a how they're going to learn that stuff. Excuse me.
By all means.
Can you clip that out?
I'm suffering the same thing, so not to worry. So are a lot of our readers
There you go.
that I met yesterday in Concord.
Okay. So the State Board and the department are not involved in those curricular level decisions. Those are determined at the local level. We at the department, and I believe the board would agree with this, but you'd have to get a separate, have separately ask them, would hope and aspire that our educators are focused on academic content in the classroom, teaching the kids the academic content that they need in order to be, knowledgeable, well educated, so that they can become good citizens. It is my hope, and I think it is an aspiration that we hopefully we all share, that educators are not bringing into the classroom political bias or really any kind of viewpoint bias. And what they really should be doing, and I hope that this is what is happening in most of our classes, is that educators are teaching students that there are multiple perspectives on all different kinds of issues, and that they are teaching them how to engage multiple perspectives. one of the things that I have observed is some of the schools have debate teams, right? And these debate teams, particularly for high school students, are very valuable for the students because they learn two really important things. One is that they learn to be able to see a problem from different perspectives, right? Because when you're in a debate, competition, you may not know if you're going to be affirmatively arguing for something or, arguing against it. So you have to learn to look at something from different perspectives to be able to formulate arguments from different perspectives. And I think when students are equipped to do that, it builds empathy for them to be able to recognize that, hey, I may not be right. Maybe there's another perspective to this issue so that they can see all sides. And so I hope that it's the aspiration for our teachers to equip students with that capacity to be able to see stuff from 360 degrees. Your question was specifically about some of the complaints that come here. And sometimes we do receive complaints about activities or materials or curricular supports in a school that may not meet what should probably be some of that non-bias, non-viewpoint bias types of information. And so when those come to us, we deal with those on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, fair enough. And thanks for letting me put you on the hot seat for a moment.
Not a hot seat. I mean, again, we want to equip these kids to be good citizens, and to be a good citizen, you have to be able to see things from a 360-degree view, to know that there are different perspectives, that everybody is not going to have the same view. Yes.
Well, I just enjoy the fact that you just did my segue for me, because my next question was citizen versus workforce. And there seems to be a tussle when I read out in the mainstream media and I hear some of the lectures that are given, that the emphasis is always on workforce. Train the kids to be able to take their place in the workforce. Workforce, 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 to paraphrase the Brady Bunch show of years ago. Is it the idea of the Board of Education, and then for the Department of Education following through that, is the goal to train people just to be in the workforce, or, as you brought up, to be a citizen?
Yeah.
Because I have seen my own emphasis is that there are two different tracks for that. And I'm not talking about the track to send kids to college and tracks to send kids to vocational training. Both, to me, are valid. I don't say that everybody should go to college. I don't think everybody should be in the trades. But one is equally as valid as the other. But what should the emphasis be on education? Training a citizen or training a member of the workforce?
So, two ways to respond to that, because I also have seen and read various things where there's a perception that kind of workforce training versus academic training are somehow in conflict with one another. And I think that, and I can't speak for the State Board of Education, but I can speak for the department, that we view helping kids to become I refer to as bright futures for kids, to bringing every student kind of to their best possible outcome, which is expanding their minds, instilling in them imagination and curiosity and a desire to learn and the capacity to keep learning. What I don't think, I think what I want to push back against is the idea that somehow education is something that you do and therefore you can complete it. Education should not be something that you complete. Yes, we have a K-12 system, but I hope that people are always learning in all different kinds of paths. So if I have my wish, it would be that every student who's kind of exiting out of the system has an insatiable desire to continue learning because of the inherent curiosity that we have instilled in them through that process. And so that will take kids, so it's not is it work, is it academic? I think that will take kids across all different kinds of domains depending on who that student is, that the student can then pursue it. So we have to give kids kind of the foundational knowledge to be able to learn and then create pathways for them to engage that capacity in a lot of different ways that their future will dictate.
Okay, let me take a side tangent just for a second.
So I don't know if I'm not answering your question.
No,
I'm trying to. I'm not trying to avoid it, but I'm trying to shift
no.
the conversation to another plane.
Yeah, no. you're actually wrapping around to something else that I want to bring up.
Okay.
In the same vein. Well, one of the things that seems to be happening is the federalization of a lot of things. Now, stepping back and going back to civics, we were built on the idea of federalism, where the federal government was to take care of a few things, do them exceedingly well, and everything else was to be left to the states and to civil society and the people therein.
Yep.
In this last century and a half, we've seen that just completely disappear, where civil society has been so squished, it's basically non-existent compared to what the founders first thought. And I know I'm ranging a little bit away from the education.
That's okay.
But do you feel that the federal Department of Education, which a lot of us think is just totally unnecessary and not one of the enumerated powers, do they get in the way? They offer a lot of money because it's the federal government, but do the strings attached make it worthwhile to do that? And I'll be bringing in another part of that.
Another thread in a moment? Okay.
On Article 28A, just to give you a heads up. Is it the view of the Board of Education and the department to act as a buffer against that federalization of the education that goes on here in New Hampshire?
Again, I can't speak for the State Board of Education.
Right? But you know what their policies are.
I do know the policies, but again,
And we don't. That's what I'm asking.
Yep. I just want to be careful to make sure that I'm on the record. I don't speak for the State Board of Education. So
I got it 3 times already.
Okay. And then I want to inject here. I mean, we've got Article 83 in our New Hampshire Constitution, which talks about a state level view of education, and so I think. The fact that it is enumerated in our Constitution gives us some guidelines as to what the state's role should be in that education. You pull in 28A, which is really kind of the top-down mandate that falls from the state down into the localized level.
Yeah, which for our readership, as a budget committee member, it's my favorite article in the New Hampshire Constitution, which basically forbids the state from sending unfunded mandates down to the local level. In other words, the state saying, you will do this, but we're not giving you any money.
Right. So I'm trying to think where we are with the question again, in terms of, so let me just talk, so the feds versus state. So I do think that it is that the state is the right vehicle to focus on education, right? In other words, I think because it's enumerated in our Constitution, I think it's appropriate for the state of New Hampshire to be involved in education, right? In other words, our Constitution doesn't prescribe that it's just going to be the local control. So we want to manage at the state level as opposed to the feds intervening too much into that process. The feds do provide us, several $100 million of grants for a variety of programs that take place in the state. I will tell you that we do go through a process when we're looking at these different grants to decide, if I apply for this grant, it comes with, to your point, a lot of strings attached, whether it's information that I'm required to, keep track of and monitor, or certain trainings that are required to take place. And so we try and do a cost-benefit analysis in terms of, okay, so if I have this money, here's the effect that it will have on the system, helping move the education to, aspirations forward. Is it worth it in terms of cost? I've done that on a number of grants, and I will tell you that there's, for the most part, it's worth it to apply for the grant in terms of the cost and the benefit associated with it. But again, that I want to be careful because that presumes, remember, the money from the feds is not free. We just send it down there and then they send it back down to us. So we got to be very cognizant of that at some point the local taxpayer had to send that money someplace for it to get back to me to begin with. So when I'm making that kind of assessment or that determination of, is this worth it, recognizing that, okay, I'm getting back some of my local taxpayers' funding, is it worth it to be able to do that or not? So,
especially when some of that funding goes only for so long, and then the requirement says, and then
correct, that would be part of
the local
has to pay for it.
Oftentimes we see that with firemen or police, where you get this grant. Oh, great! I can hire 2, 3, 4 more people, and at the end of 5 years, now you are stuck with the.
We try to be very careful to not take the bait or step into the trap on those. Is how I describe those. They want to fund a position for 2 years, and then it's on us after that. One of the things that you look at when you look at grants is they refer to as sustainability of the grant. In other words, like, okay, so when this money goes away, have we moved the needle, or did we just intervene for a short period of time? The money goes away, the program falls apart, and nothing happens. Like, that can be more disruptive to the long-term process anyway. So maybe you think that you've made progress, but in fact you've just disrupted the system for a period of time, and then it's just back to, either where it was before, or maybe it's worse. So you want to be careful that you don't disrupt, the status quo in that sense.
Approximately how many of those grants fall into that particular category that you would refuse?
So I haven't refused any at this point in time. I have yet, we don't apply. We apply for a number of different grants, but we apply for the ones that we think are going to make sense. So I couldn't tell you if there's ones that we didn't apply for that didn't make sense, but we try to look at every one of them. Because before we accept that grant, I get what's referred to as some assurances that I have to make regarding the grant, and I am civilly liable for those assurances they have to make. Some of them, there was a Department of Justice grant, 13 pages of assurances that I have to sign off as an individual saying, we will do this, I will make sure of this, I will make sure of this. I'm like, that's a lot of assurances. Are we sure we want this thing? So let's go through and really look at what it is that we're signing up for and making sure that it's going to actually benefit our communities more than the cost of complying.
Another area.
Yeah.
Let's take it to the next level down. Obviously, there have been some things where a lot of local people don't understand my beginning question to you, which was there is a state level of control over education. Some people think that the state is taking over the local education. Certainly with, I could call it Volinsky 1, but I will refrain from calling it Volinsky 2, but I think you know what I mean, where the word cherish in the state constitution meant that now the state has to pay for education because some towns, and this is my words, not yours, have so mismanaged their towns that they don't have the money to pay for it. I can have a discussion with other people about that, not you. But we all know that he who has the gold makes the rules, and if the next version or next round of this goes through, are we going to end up perhaps, and this is a total hypothetical question to you, like a lot of states where it is the states that really do control education and there's very little local control, even though if they have a local school board they're so bound, just like the regular municipalities and towns and cities here in New Hampshire, because they are mere political subdivisions of what is a Dillon's Rule state.
Yeah.
Do you see that there might be a little bit of a danger in that, in where the state does push itself too much into the local control and destroy some local programs that I want to ask you about in a couple minutes?
Great. So when we talk about the funding for schools, I think it's important to understand that at the department, we don't decide how the funding is provided to the states. And the resources here, I have them focused mostly on not how much money we get, but what do we do with the money we got, right? It's like we have a certain amount of funding that we receive for every student today and that we're collecting from local taxpayers and is being deployed. So the resources here at the department are focused on making sure that we use that money in a way that stretches every dollar as far as we can and gets the most bang for the buck in terms of the programs we're investing in to make sure that they're going to help move the agenda forward. In terms of the idea that maybe there's there's not enough funding in the education system and that there is potential for a lawsuit, or that someone would change the formula such that more of the state funding, so you figure about 2/3 of state funding today comes from the local taxpayers and 1/3 of it comes from the state. If that formula were to shift in an attempt to create a more equitable system relative to property valuations or something else, as these are the arguments that are being made for this, and so more of that money would come through the state before it reached the local school, right? In other words, like it would be collected here and then we would be redistributing it on some formula. I absolutely agree that there's a concern to make sure that if something like that were to happen, that all of a sudden we don't have a homogeneous system that is defined at the state level.
Fair enough. It was a tough question for you.
No,
I
it's not a tough
appreciate
question.
you
It's
taking-
okay.
Well, it does put you on point.
Yes.
But I do understand that you have to do what you're told to do versus I get leeway in this. So
Well, and
understood.
I do have a lot of ability to make sure that the resources that we do have to deploy, we deploy well, right? And so I'm making sure that we're deploying those resources well.
Okay. 28A, let's run back to that. As a budget committee member, I am always asking my municipality and my school board, what are programs that you're doing that the state has mandated to which you're not getting any money? And I do know from calling your department, and I have to tell you, when I have talked to the people who deal with the data collection and things like this, I have always been treated very well, very politely.
Well, I appreciate
very
that. I will
courteous.
give you that feedback. Yes. Okay.
Absolutely. They couldn't always answer my questions. They go, we've never thought about data like that before. There is a list that you have for those programs that are pushed down to the local level that fail the 28A article, which says, you got to do this, but we're not paying for it.
And just
How
to be
much-
clear, that generally those are programs that the legislature passes, and we're the administrators of the programs, right?
Administrators. So do you ever talk to, say, the education committee and ask them, why are we doing this? Why are we as a state, either you here in the executive branch or them in the legislative branch, why are we obviating our own New Hampshire Constitution?
I have not posed that question to members of the education committee, and probably that would be a good question for you to pose to them.
Okay, fair enough.
I will use this opportunity to put a plug in for data. So in December,
please.
we released a new tool for folks called iPlatform for Education. If you go to the department website, just Google NHDOE, you will see iPlatform for Education. And we do sit on a vast amount of data here at the department. And so this is an attempt to use modern technology and tools to make that information easily accessible to folks. So we've got some of the data out there, and we've got plans. We're going to continue to roll in more and more data out so that all of this information that we're sitting on is accessible to anybody who wants to see what's going on, so we can be very transparent in that process. And my hope is that as we make that information kind of ubiquitously available, it creates community conversations so that people can see, like, okay, what's happening in my community, and is this a good thing or is it not a good thing? Is it, because the data is just objective information. How you use that information in terms of crafting your local education is up to the various communities. And so we're trying to give tools to communities to be able to have those conversations.
I'm glad you brought that up because it is something that I look at all the time.
iPlatform?
No, not iPlatform, but I'm looking at data.
Okay.
And sometimes it's very hard to scrounge around. As a quick aside, my first year, in my first term, the first thing I did as a budget committee member, I did an analysis of all of the towns of my size, all 32 positions that were locally available, and ranked our town based on the average salaries, because we were always thinking, why are our taxes so high? And it turned out that for 30 of those positions, our employees were either in the first, second, or third highest paid positions, and that had never been done before.
And so so here's an example of how you can have a community conversation. So in that particular case, I'm guessing that you then took that information back and says, okay, so we're paying the highest, but that's maybe that's a decision your community made because we want to get the best. So we're going to have the highest salaries and we're willing to pay a premium for those. And that's a value decision that a community might make. The community might say, we're not looking for the best, we just want to be median in terms of our capacity. And so then you would use that to say, how do we become median? Right? So those are the conversations that I think you can drive through good data.
Oh, it caused quite a number of conversations, and all around the lake for at least 5 years there were reverberations because I posted all of it on a now defunct website, Guilford Grok. And it was the first use of new media for that kind of analysis.
Right.
And it was all open source. Anybody could look at it.
Right, just good transparency
All of that
creates
stuff.
good conversations about what do we want for our community.
And selectmen did make some changes. So my question is,
So then that's a good thing, right?
Yes,
so
it
there
was a
it
good
shows
thing.
how data can be used valuably to try and do stuff. I mean, one of the examples I talk about in the education space is we have data for, in-district and out-of-district suspensions. Or, not in-district, I mean in-school versus out-of-school suspensions. And, some district may have, a high number of in-school suspensions. And somebody say, like, well, why do they have so high? Well, maybe they're not using any out-of-school suspensions. That may just be their disciplinary approach. And so without passing judgment on that, the community can decide, is this a good way to do it, or do we want to do something else? Again, I'm just trying to create transparency so that community can have that conversation.
now can anybody ask, and I know I have asked
Yep.
and gotten the blank stare.
I'll try not to stare blankly, okay?
Well, knowing your background, when I ask what is your indirect to direct ratio,
Yeah.
both on head count and cost, you go, that's a valid question. I know this because that's my background.
Yeah.
And coming out of the manufacturing area, that's something that every plant manager knows.
Yes.
I ask my superintendent that, and they go, what is that? And
So I can tell you from at the department, it's a very easy statement. So I am familiar with that concept of direct
Yeah.
versus indirect. We are all indirect here, right? Like if my mission is educating students, we are indirect costs trying to support the educators, the teachers in the classrooms, ultimately getting those kids to those outcomes. So I'm indirect. I am not direct labor. Direct labor is the teacher in the classroom with the student, and outside of that, everybody else is an indirect as far as I'm concerned.
Correct, but the school administration has no clue in a lot of cases when I ask that question. I have to explain it over and over again.
I would
Is that the
encourage
kind of
you,
question
okay, go ahead.
that I could submit to your data folks and say, is this some kind of a study in setting it up? Because once you set something up in computers, it's always available.
Yeah.
Are people able to ask those kinds of questions? And if not, would you folks be willing to look at that kind of stuff and set that up on a permanent basis?
So first of all, it is set up on a permanent basis today in terms of dollars spent. So I think if you go look at the DOE 25, you will see a direct and indirect. There's different categories of staffing in there.
Okay.
So that it is possible to kind of extract that data. Some of the early data that we've already put out onto the platform gives us ratios of administration versus teaching and stuff like that. So we're beginning to create more transparency around that. I think that you'll see some more of that coming along, but absolutely, I think it's important that not only we have transparency into that, but make it available to folks. So
Good, because that's the kind of question that I've been asking. I try to ask questions.
pull your
Just-
DOE 25, and I think you'll be satisfied.
DOE 25.
It's a report from the department.
Correct.
Well, it's not a department report. It is the financial report
Right.
from the school district.
And then would you be able to provide, like, I'm not putting this correctly, similar type of towns together in an aggregate, and to be able to do that comparison vis-a-vis direct versus indirect to get comparisons and ratios? Because I've looked at your suggested ratios and I look at my town's ratios and going, now I know why my budget is so high.
So what I would tell you is, so if you go out to iPlatform, I've already built some of those ratios for you, and I've built the capacity for you to do comparisons. You can see your district versus the state averages. You can see your district compared to another district. So all of those tools are built into this platform. Have you been on iPlatform?
I have not. And
You should
this
absolutely
is the
do
first
that.
time I have heard of it.
I mean, and getting a little bit overly wonky, what I will tell you in addition is you can juxtapose different types of data. Like I want to see this versus this, and I will draw a regression for you so you can see if there's a trend going in a certain direction or not. So try to create modern tools for data so that you can have, again, transparency and start community conversations.
This is a great thing because one of the big deals, as you well know, here in New Hampshire is that we're seeing enrollments plunge. Ours has gone down significantly over the last 10 years. And while the teacher ratios have also gone down, they haven't gone down quite as fast, and the administration ratio has remained the same. So it's something that I know that comes up in the papers, comes up on TV and radio, that people are saying, if we don't have this many students anymore, why are our costs going up? So it sounds like this iPlatform is a place to go.
I think that it will provide a lot of valuable information, and we'll continue to put more and more information out there. I don't think we have the finance stuff loaded yet, but we have a lot of information. So
Yeah, head counts and finances, that's going to be a big help.
and performance and all kinds of
Correct.
measures on
And,
schools.
and any forward-looking school board should be all over this.
So I can tell you that the information was actually recently used in terms of community conversations. I like to describe there are two districts in the state that, one and they have superintendents who are related to one another. And one is a affluent community and one is a less affluent community. And so if I look at just my achievement results, the affluent community outperforms the non-affluent community. But achievement is only one measure of what's going on in a community. So I also have growth in terms of student growth, because if you're growing kids. And if you look at the student growth, what you'll find is the non-affluent community outgrew the affluent community. And so they have a story to tell. They're like, okay, so we're not getting the results we want, but we're growing the kids. So what's working, what's not working? Again, those community conversations I think are important to have.
And I think in today's political environment, I think that's a story that's being undertold because we always hear about the money. We're not hearing about the results.
Well, isn't that the whole, you deploy dollars in the system in order to get a result? That's the whole point. We're trying to get someplace.
And that brings us to probably the one thing I want to find out more about.
Okay.
Which is learning everywhere.
Yes, okay.
Which I think is a good step because from my standpoint, and I know it varies from a lot, but my standpoint is that a child does not deserve a public education. A child does deserve a publicly funded education, which basically puts the emphasis on the child and the parents directing their child's education versus I happen to live in a zip code and there's the building and I'm there. You're starting off with the concept learning everywhere, which is starting to disrupt that.
Well, actually what I would say is it's helping it along. I can tell you, Learn Everywhere embeds concepts that the state of New Hampshire and the education system has embraced for many, many years. In 2005, we put into our rules the aspiration that all kids get these varied learning experiences by various organizations and talented individuals and nonprofits and for-profits and community organizations, everything, right? We said that this is important, and it's a shall in our rules, which basically means that school districts are supposed to be doing this. That was in 2005. In 2011, the State Board of Education did a study on extended learning opportunities and essentially said every kid ought to have one of these things. In 2011, the State Board adopted a vision that basically talked about the need to do this. And the reason why they were saying that this is so important is, the current education system has implicit barriers. Not all kids thrive in that system. There are some kids who just check out and they're not engaged. There's too much drama. For whatever reason, it almost doesn't matter. So we know that we got to create these alternative learning pathways for kids. Some districts have really embraced this and done a great job with it, and they've got a lot of extended learning types of opportunities for kids that create these kinds of pathways. Other districts have struggled to do that, in spite of the fact that we've been working on it for 14 years now. And so Learn Everywhere is really a program to allow me to help those districts accomplish the vision that we have had for students all along. By engaging in different, like our community partners, which is what we talk about in our vision statement and in our rules, really, to be able to get there. An example of this that I like to talk about is I was at Central High School one evening. It was about 8:30 at night. And there were about 15 or 20 kids there.
In what town?
In Manchester.
Okay.
Central High School in Manchester. About 15 or 20 kids there. And when I walked in, there were a FIRST robotics team. And they design and program robots to do competitions.
So Dean came in.
Yes, exactly. So when I first came in, I got some kids who were sitting in this one area and they were programming in Java to allow their robots to navigate through a course. And I'm like, wow, this is great. These kids are really learning how to code, right, to get their thing working. I had some other kids who were working in a shop with two engineers from Bosch. to design their robots. So they've got these expert, world-class engineers helping them learn how to design robots and build robots and solve all kinds of problems. And at one point during the visit, there's the young lady who was a captain of the team came to me and said, "Commissioner, you have to help me." Hang on a second, I have to help myself.
By all means.
"You have to help me, Commissioner. The school closes at 9. We need the school open till 10 o'clock. And I just thought to myself, ding, I win. I've got kids begging me to open up their access to the school so they can learn more, right? But the second thought that I had is when those kids finish with all this learning and coding and learning and engineering, then they get to go home and do their homework, because the learning that they've been doing for the last 4 or 5 hours, that doesn't count, right? That was just fun, because it's not school. So what we have to recognize is that learning is not limited from 7:30 to 2:30 inside a building, right? Learning is happening all over the place. And if we can get these opportunities for kids, what you'll find is when they start having success in some alternative program like that, it helps them to be successful in the actual environment itself, because they're like, they feel good about themselves. They're like, I can learn, I'm okay, I got capacity, I can do something. And these are kids who otherwise just seem to struggle all day long in the 7:30 to 2:30 system and not succeeding. We give them C's, we give them D's, we tell them that you didn't quite get there. So let's create environments where they can succeed, and we can help them realize that they have capacity, they can learn, they have the capability, and we can draw them in. And so that's really the direction that Learn Everywhere is taking us, is fulfilling a vision that New Hampshire has had for learning for many years to help engage all of our kids. We know, and the research supports, that kids who are engaged in their learning learn more and they don't get into trouble. Those are really important things for kids today.
Well, certainly the local school board has a lot to do with that. Such as, okay, we'll stay open till 10.
They don't have, why? Learning didn't have to happen there, right? Yeah.
Well, but usually in a group environment, oftentimes you have to be...
If they were in the school. Yep.
Correct. How receptive to this idea are the local school boards? Is this something that they are embracing? Some of them are saying, get out of my face.
So we've tried to be really careful in terms of not violating local control, right? So what these Learn Everywhere programs do is allow students to get credit towards leading to graduation that deal with the minimum standards. Remember, it's the State Board of Education that authorizes a school and a school board. It's the State Board of Education that tells the local school board, in order to graduate the students, they have to meet these minimum standards for education, which is a list of 20 credits that a student needs to accumulate. Now, that's what the minimum standards are, and Learn Everywhere will help students to meet those minimum standards. What Learn Everywhere does not do is define what a student needs in order to graduate from a high school. So for example, there's the local control. We're defining how you can get credits leading to minimum standards, but the local school board is going to be the entity that decides what you need to graduate and get a diploma from their high school. And the state board is not wandering into that area. They're leaving that discretion up to the local school board. So we've really tried to be careful about how we parse that.
Okay. Local control. My take on this is that the most local control is that of the parent.
Yes.
And being a software engineer, I know that most of my programming is not in just making the software work, it's doing the defensive programming all around it. You know, keep it from making its own mistakes and keep people from making either accidental or mandatory mistakes around it,
okay,
i.e. hacking.
Yes.
So what if there is a child that has an interest in doing robotics or some other type of program,
right,
but the local school board is not? Do you foresee empowering the parent, the most local of control, to be able to still do something for their child around a local school board that says, nope, we're going to stick to the old 1890s warehouse school system, and you will do what we say and no more and no less?
So one would hope that a local school district has the students' best interests in heart and wants to work with parents to create the best possible opportunities. And so the school board itself would embrace these kinds of opportunities for students. The way that we've configured Learn Everywhere, though, is if a school district is, less interested in that kind of a thing, but it is a very interesting thing to the family, the parents would be able to choose that option, but it doesn't do anything with money, so there's no dollars involved with anything. So a parent could elect that to allow their student to accumulate credits leading to graduation. But again, that student would have to bring that credit back into that school, and the school board would be deciding what you need to graduate. We're just giving you the minimum standard. So we know that we're working on that 20 minimum, but not whatever else the school board wants the student to graduate.
Yeah. And I ask this because I know in my local school board and a number of others around the state, if you go to a school board meeting, they will have a public comments session, but it is only the public that says what they want. You cannot ask the school board any questions because they refuse to answer back. Which to me...
Well, I think that's probably varying. Some school boards are much more engaged and willing to answer back, and I'm sure they'll meet with you and engage you. Yeah.
Some. And I know that in mine, they've made it very difficult for parents to approach the people that they elected to the school board.
Right.
So that's why I asked the question about the most local control, that if a school board doesn't want to participate, but the parent knows that is the best thing for my child.
Yep, we're trying to create that pathway. Yeah, we're trying to make sure that pathway is built in there.
And that really goes into another program that you're doing for family engagement.
Yes. So we do have the Scholastic Center on Family Voice in the state. And really this comes along with, just like Learn Everywhere and many of the programs we're doing, we're trying, as you described, a system that was designed in the 1800s, and we got to move the system forward. So we're trying to move the system forward, and it's hard to move a system forward because there's a lot of people who've been working in it for a long time. It has a lot of stasis in terms of being able to move. So, but it is also not fair for me to ask to move a system without helping everybody kind of move along. And so there are two programs in particular. You mentioned the New Hampshire Center for Family Voice, and we have what's referred to as a UDL program as well that I want to talk about. The New Hampshire Center for Family Voice is we're trying to move a system, but many parents themselves have experienced school, and they think they know what school should look like, and they're resistant to changing school. They're saying, hey, here's how school was when I went 30 years ago, and here's what it's going to be like for you, right? And so this New Hampshire Center for Family Voice is really trying to empower parents in that process of engage, and help the schools as well to engage the parents so that we can create communication and everybody can kind of move forward together, right? Because I think it's important that that happens. The second is about UDL, is called Universal Design for Learning, and this is really to help my educators move forward, because many of the people who are educators were taught when they went to college in what's referred to as a stand and deliver model. Like, I taught it, did the kids learn it? Is another story perhaps, right? And so that model has shifted, and all the educators know that it's shifted. It has to be about student learning, not about teaching. You teach all day long, but if nobody learns anything, you haven't met the objective. And so this helps those educators with specific skills to be able to kind of shift the table around and focus on learners. And Universal Design for Learning helps them to differentiate instruction in their classroom so that every single student can get to their best possible outcome. So all of these different pieces are helping to move the education system into the 21st century, and realize kind of the vision that New Hampshire has had for education that does harness community resources, creates flexible, innovative, creative environments that allow students to find different pathways to be able to get to success.
Well, certainly it sounds like the path that I would hope for is starting. And it looks like you're trying to move a lot all at the same time, because I look at how life is right now. We are moving very quickly into a decentralized environment, except for politics, but that's a whole nother story, where everything is done locally. Mass customization.
Mass customization, exactly.
In the manufacturing field. You look in the computers, everything is gone. I started when mainframes were the big deal. Then I went to mini computers. Then I went to PCs. And now
Now it's like right here. Do I have a phone in my pocket? But
your phone has more power than the Apollo space program.
There you go.
And basically, it is a walking, talking, video playing, song singing type of device that has literally disrupted everything. And I feel that education, and a lot of our readers feel that education is ripe for that same kind of deal. And we see the explosion in the alternative ways of doing education, where you have the traditional government schools. You have private schools along with them. You now have charter schools. In fact, you're working with I guess it's called the New Hampshire Career Academy.
Career Academy.
Career.
Yes.
Gosh, did I spell it that badly? And I've heard you talk about what you've done out in Great Bay, out in the Seacoast, where you started a state-sponsored charter school, if I get the terminology.
Yeah, we're not quite there yet, but you have some of the. I mean, there was a program out there that we're working on putting together a program for students. Exactly.
Right. So where they go from high school to this charter school, and it's also in combination with a community college there. So you're accelerating the movement of the education system for that particular student.
Yeah, for creating flexibility, because there's some kids who are ready to go to that next step, and can we create more opportunities for them to do that? So we're doing some things to create those opportunities, but we can do more things all the time to blend those systems and make it kind of seamless for students to advance. Again, you know, in
so
the
it's giving people, sorry to interrupt, but it's giving people more choices, because we have, you know, those types of older models. We have homeschooling, we have online schools now, and I'm quite sure that there's going to be a plethora of other methodologies that you can pick and choose from all at the same time.
So as you described it, just to help you understand some of the things that we're doing, so as you described it, we're creating options for students and different schooling options as you just laid it out, but we're going down another level, right? We're creating options within the system, right?
The building blocks.
Within the system, there's lots of ways for kids to get there, right? And so you have that in some schools that are embracing ELOs and are doing a lot of options, they're creating options, maybe they've got a lot of different elective classes and stuff like that.
ELOs.
Trying to make sure, extended learning opportunity.
Thank you.
Just trying to create a lot of options within the system, right? It doesn't have to be this system versus this system. How about within the system, we create lots of pathways and options is what we're trying to do for students.
And with that comes a lot of complication and a lot of tracking.
A lot of opportunity.
Opportunity, absolutely. Because to me, the child comes first in education, which hasn't been the mode or the modality of what we've seen in years past. Certainly not in the way that you and I grew up in.
Right.
And I'm just glad that my hair has turned gray and not loose.
So what we know relative to student performance is that there is disparity. Students who come from socioeconomically disadvantaged homes perform lower on our standardized tests, and that disparity is growing. And part of that disparity is reflected in the fact that, you know, kids coming from that background, for whatever reason, just don't access the current system very well. And so we need to find other ways to help them access the system, because these are kids who have, you know, potential and capacity, and they can really thrive. And I'll use an example of one of the students in the program you mentioned over at Great Bay. There's a student who came over, you know, in the traditional sense of the word, maybe wasn't one of our top performing students. This student has just excelled and is now a leader and a spokesman for the group of students who are over there. And he's thriving because he's got something that he's engaged in, he's excited about, and he wants to learn and he wants to master. And he can see a bright future for himself. So he's very engaged and excited about the system.
And I think that's the great thing, is being able to give more options. And I wish you an awful lot of luck going forward.
Appreciate that.
There's going to be a lot of headwind, but I know that when families are engaged, better things happen. I come from a lower middle class, maybe even lower than that, but my mom made sure that we did our homework.
Good.
That we read a lot. I devoured the library, several libraries in my hometown. So learning was always something that was emphasized in our larger family. She was one.
So we want to
8.
instill that in every single student in New Hampshire.
And my brother is the only one without an advanced degree among 17 cousins. Wow. But that's right. He owns a multi-million-dollar business. So he's having
Success can be defined a lot of different ways.
But really, to kind of bring this to an end, family engagement is necessary. Parental engagement is highly needed. And I think that's the one thing that we haven't talked about today, and maybe we'll do that another time if you're willing.
Yeah.
Because it really is, in the beginning, little kids love to learn. I'm watching that as we're raising our 3-year-old.
They come up curiously. Yes, they're curious kids.
And we've got to make sure that that continues, but that can only happen not just when they get to grade school or kindergarten, but it starts with the parents. And how do we get that missing piece
Yep.
into the educational system without it becoming a case of the state demands that you do this, mom and dad.
Right.
But that'll be a topic for another
We can do
time.
that. I would be happy to engage on that topic as well. So.
Well, Frank Edelblut, Commissioner of Education here in New Hampshire, I want to say thank you
you.
for a delightful
Pleasure.
time
Yeah, good
talking
conversation.
about this.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
And we are done.
Croc TV.